Thank you. Thank you. We're back again for another exciting chapter of expansion of consciousness. And I'm your host, Jason Medlock. Uh, I've been waiting for this interview for a while, and I'm not going to tell you guys how long, but it's been a while. And just an incredible man who has experienced and has written about so many different things with the subconscious mind and with emotions and how to affect the mind and how to reprogram the mind and how to use EFT tapping. And I know we've had guests on before that talked about EFT tapping, but this is at another level. And we're going to be speaking to Dr. Dawson Church. He's given me permission to call him Dawson. So I want you guys to know that I'm not disrespecting Dr. Church, but Dawson is a wonderful human being. He's a best-selling science writer and the author of 3 award-winning books. The Genie in Your Genes broke new ground by showing that gene expression is influenced by emotions. Mind to Matter is based on hundreds of studies showing that the brain plays a key role in constructing the reality around us. And we all know that. In the Bliss brain, he demonstrates that we have cultivated peak states. Our brain rapidly rewards themselves for happiness. He's the founder of the Veteran Stress Solution, which has offered free PTSD treatments for over 22,000 veterans. After retiring from active business management, Dawson has continued to teach and inspire through his presentations, his podcasts, his 13 best-selling books, and blog posts. I want to bring on right now Dr. Church, but we're going to call him Dawson.
Jason,
how you doing, Dawson?
Well, it's a joy to be here. Good to be with you.
I am so excited, and I wanted to make sure that I, gave you the proper introduction because you've done so much, in the community of universal consciousness, and the work you've done with emotional triggers for veterans, and I'm just glad you're here. And we were in the back office speaking a minute ago, and I was talking about all the wonderful things that you've written about, and particularly we were talking about EFT tapping. Can we talk about that and start off a little bit? And everybody will probably ask you, where did you start? How did you? We'll get to that. But I want to know about the beautiful modality of EFT tapping.
Yeah, I'd love to start there because it's at the foundation of what we all need, which is stress reduction. And all kinds of things make us stressed. The past makes us stressed because we've had traumatic events in our early childhood and maybe in our adult lives. We have stresses going on right now. We have future events which worry us about the possibility of things happening that might be still to come. And so all of these things are doing physiological change in our body. They're raising our blood pressure, they're raising our heart rate, they're having us have higher levels of hormones like cortisol and neurotransmitters like adrenaline. And so there are all these physiological things happening in our bodies if we're stressed. And EFT is simply the quickest, simplest way to reduce that stress that I found. And it simply involves thinking about those things that stress you, but while you hold them in mind, you then stimulate acupuncture points, not with needles, just by tapping on them. So there's one over here, for example. There's a meridian of energy that runs all the way up the front of your body, ends right over here. And this one spot over here, people, if they just rub or tap that one spot while they think about the bad stuff, can very rapidly reduce their stress. And when we have them hooked up to a blood pressure monitor, we see their blood pressure drop, often by a very significant amount. We see their brain waves normalize inside their heads. We see their stress hormones like cortisol drop dramatically. So all those kinds of things are happening when we reduce our stress, and EFT is a really effective method for doing that in a few moments. I use it myself every day. I recommend it to other people. We've treated over 22,000 people in the Veteran Stress Solution with PTSD, with EFT. We work with Rwanda genocide orphans. We worked with survivors of the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. We have a team right now working in Ukraine. We have other people working in Palestine. So it is incredibly effective, even for these really serious traumas. I just recommend people get their hands around something as simple and easy and quick to do that will reduce their stress and everyday solutions. So that's just EFT in a nutshell.
And it's an awesome modality, and it works. I mean, some people try to parallel it with the needles when you have the needle work done. And I forget what the term is.
Acupuncture,
Yeah, acupuncture. Some people say, they liken it to acupuncture, and in some ways it could be, it could be similar. But tapping is a very, very effective modality. But I want to pivot and talk about this intelligence that we all have, this spiritual guidance, and this universal consciousness that we're all tapped into. And one of the questions, just from reading all the material on your website, and I didn't know which book to buy first, but I'm going to buy. But my question was, how can individuals tap into their inherent spiritual intelligence to connect with universal consciousness? And what are the implications of this connection for a person's personal transformation, so that they can become, so to speak, globally aware?
Yeah, that's a big question. And so for many, many centuries, we've had spiritual schools, we've had wisdom traditions who have made that their focus. And usually there was a founder, there was a Jesus, there was a Muhammad, there was a Buddha, there was some great human being, human teacher that touched the divine. And like Moses on Mount Sinai, coming back from Mount Sinai with these 10 commandments or rules for living that he wanted to share with his whole tribe. And so usually there's been this pinnacle experience, this mystical oneness experience that people have. They break through the veil, they're able to plug into the all that is, and then they come back to their culture and they try to explain it. Now, that's really where we get into a lot of trouble, because Islam looks very different from Judaism, looks very, very different from Hinduism or Buddhism or Taoism, but they all at their core have that mystical experience. And they then try and share with us the path, the way to get there ourselves. And so that's been the endeavor for centuries now, is for spirituality and these elevated states to become known and accessible to us by following the teachings of these various philosophies. Trauma gets in the way. When I was 15 years old, I ran away from home and joined a spiritual community, and we learned that great tradition that underlies all the world's religions. And the teaching that our group had was, don't worry about all those bad things in your past and all that trauma you suffered through as a child. Just ascend to higher consciousness, and then you're this elevated being, and all this mud, all this stuff in the basement is just going to go away because you'll ascend into a higher state of consciousness. Modern research in the last 25 years shows that that's not true. That's spiritual bypassing. It's bypassing your wounding. And what happens if you do that? There are a lot of examples of this from Hinduism, Buddhism, and all the other traditions, that if you hit those states and you haven't gone and cleaned up the basement and all the bad things lurking down there that hurt you in the past, that becomes the dark side or the shadow self. And there's so many of these great spiritual teachers who, after a while, that dark side starts to show up and really sabotage what they're doing and sabotage their elevated states. So you have to do both. There is no free pass. You have to go in there. You have to do EFT. You have to do breath work. You have to do grounding, time in nature, all the things it requires to release all those old traumas. If you do that first, then you're moving into higher consciousness. Then you no longer have that self-sabotaging inner dark side, shadow self that's going to drag you down. And so that's why these are two very important pieces of the personal growth path. It's wonderful to ascend into these elevated states of oneness, and you also have to tap do therapy, do the personal integrity work, whatever it takes to release all that old trauma as well.
And I can, just from, understanding all of that, that personal transformation becomes bliss. It makes you, you have an elevated sense of awareness, intuitiveness, and you see things differently.
You see things
you
very
know,
differently.
you
And
know,
one of the cool things about when we do neuroscience research is seeing what that bliss looks like on a brain scan. And the the term, there are several terms in Sanskrit for positive mood, and the one that we think of as happiness or joy is actually the bottom of the scale in Sanskrit. Much higher than that is a term in Sanskrit called vishoka, and vishoka means sorrowless joy. And we watch people when they have them hooked up to in a lab to a brain scanner, and they move to that stage of sorrowless joy, and they are up to 7 times as happy as the average person. They're hitting levels of bliss we don't even know about. Above Vishoka is Ananda, and the Sanskrit word Ananda, bliss, and we have this neurochemical called anandamide, the bliss molecule, and there's huge amounts of this released from the brains of meditators. So these people are happy at a level that the average person has no concept of even being possible. And that's one of the problems we have in explaining all this when we are coming out of the lab and talking to ordinary people. It's like, hey, this isn't like the happiness you experience sitting on the beach in Cancun and sipping a daiquiri or watching your favorite NFL team win. It's not that kind of bliss at all. This is like intoxicating
yes,
ecstasy, and you want to train your mind and brain and body. In fact, in one of the sections of my book Bliss Brain, I have a list of the neurochemicals your body releases in orgasm, and side by side a list of the neurochemicals it releases in deep meditation, and they match. So you're having this orgasm-like experience when you're in bliss brain in that state of ananda, and it's a remarkable state. It shows up on a brain scanner as very, very different from ordinary happiness. And the cool thing is everyone's brain has these circuits. Anyone can attain that. You have to just train yourself to reach those elevated states.
and it's about staying committed. It's about setting your intentions. And before we came on, I was telling you that I was very interested in epigenetic transfer, and the genie in your genes is interesting to me. As it covers the science of epigenetics. So, in what ways do your thoughts and emotions directly influence your gene expression? And in your opinion, how can this understanding empower us to cultivate health and well-being, at the cellular level?
That's a great question, Jason. And one way to answer it is by talking about the opposite of that. So it's intuitively clear to us that if rather than going into ecstasy and going into joyful states and growing and moving into transformation, if instead we're stuck in fear and stress, we know intuitively our bodies feel bad. And it's pretty obvious to us that our adrenaline's going to be high, that our cortisol is going to be high. And so
Yes.
what's happening is that when you think a negative thought, just when you fill your mind or even involuntarily have a negative thought. So now you have a negative thought, a negative emotion attached to that. That sends a signal from the brain into the part of the adrenal glands that makes adrenaline and cortisol, and it triggers a gene called CYP11B1. And when that gene is triggered, when our thoughts, our emotions are sending that stress signaling, and our adrenal glands are getting that message, turn on CYP11B1, it turns that gene on. It just cranks up our production of cortisol and adrenaline. And it does it in about 3 seconds. It doesn't take a long time to do that, because our ancestors needed a quick stress response to threats in the environment. So we are able, with a thought, with a feeling, with an emotion, with a belief, with an abstract worry like that, to literally trigger the expression of a gene. And actually, we're triggering the expression of thousands of genes, but that's just one example. When you then relax, when you tap, when you meditate, when you regulate your heart rate variability, when you do deep breathing, when you move into compassion and kindness, a different signal is sent to your adrenal glands. And they then get the signal to upregulate the gene CYP17A1, a totally different gene. And when they get that signal, they shut down the production of cortisol and they turn on the production of DHEA, your cell repair and rejuvenation molecule. And so you are directly influencing the expression of that gene, CYP17A1, turning it on by thought alone. Just think positive, compassionate, kind thoughts. You're literally turning on that gene. Multiply this by the other 26,000 genes in our body, and you get the picture.
And you know, you wonder, these cells are actually communicating with each other. These genes are actually then delivering a different expression. Who's controlling this? Is it Christ consciousness? Is it the subconscious mind? Is it the higher self? And those are the things that keep you up at night, trying to figure out, wow, this beautiful structure, this biological genius that Source has created is absolutely amazing.
Absolutely, it is. And the cool thing about it too is that our brains are wired this way. So
Mhm.
we have what I call in my books caveman brain. And caveman brain is really good at responding to threats and spotting opportunities. It's scanning the horizon with all of our five senses all the time, seeing, can I eat it? Will it eat me? Is it a threat? Is it an opportunity? And this is our ancient reptilian brain. And people say that sometimes disparagingly, but actually, our ancient reptilian brain is fantastic at monitoring sleep, monitoring the environment, monitoring respiration and circulation. It does a really good job at physical regulation. The caveman brain is on, it's looking for the bad stuff all the time. In psychology, we call it the brain's negativity bias. And there are two regions that are particularly active. One is right over here behind your forehead. The other is in the same position in the back of your head. This is the mid prefrontal cortex. This is the precuneus back here. That's caveman brain. And it's always looking for what's wrong with your money, with your body, with your partner, with your job, with the company, with the government, with the world, with everything else going on out there. That part of your brain is expert at pointing out what's wrong, and it keeps up a constant flow of dialogue with you, saying, look, that's a bad thing, worry about this, think about that problem you had last year, maybe it'll happen again next year. It just is this incessant Woody Allen type chatter in our minds that just drives us crazy. That's caveman brain. We also, though, have four circuits. I go over these in my book, Bliss Brain. We have four
Yes.
circuits that make up what we call the Enlightenment Network. And when we look at the brains of monks and nuns and people who are in ecstatic states of Ananda, we find that the caveman brain, parts of the brain, these two parts of the brain just shut down. And the part of the brain that has to do with compassion and love and joy and kindness and hope and awe is completely lit up. So it's not just a mood change or a spiritual change. It's literally a change in the way our brain functions. And every single person has this. When they are in caveman brain, it shuts down the Enlightenment Network. When we turn on the Enlightenment Network, it suppresses caveman brain. These two things are like a teeter-totter. So just like cortisol and DHEA are in inverse relationship to each other, same way caveman brain and the Enlightenment Network are in inverse relationships. When we shut one down, when we de-stress ourselves, the Enlightenment Network can turn on. And when the Enlightenment Network is not being used, when we aren't using all those faculties inside our heads, caveman brain is highly active. And it's all based in stress, it's all based in belief, it's based in self-talk, it's based in emotion, all these things over which we have complete control.
And beautiful concepts, and they all work in unison with each other. But you mentioned the book Bliss Brain. And as I was reading that part of your website, the overall message seems to me to be the peak states of flow. Do you know, or can you tell us, what does the recent neuroscience tell us about the brain patterns of mystics and meditators like me
Yes.
in peak states of flow, and how can ordinary people out there that are listening train their brains to access that blissful state?
Yeah, that's another good question. And what we find when we hook people up to an EEG is there's a band, a frequency band, in which the conscious mind functions in the ordinary world. And it's called beta, just because it was the second brainwave discovered. Beta doesn't mean anything, just as a label, like the letter B. Alpha, the first brainwave discovered, was called alpha A. The second was called beta B. And so people in ordinary awareness are in beta, and we see a big amplitude, a lot of beta in both the left and the right hemispheres when you're just navigating the world, driving your car, going to the store, doing your work, engaging in conversation. All these activities of consciousness means you have a lot of beta. What you don't have a lot of in those ordinary consciousness states is the slower wave, alpha, and then the two slowest waves, theta and delta. And also there's a very, very fast wave called gamma. Again, you don't have a lot of that when you're in beta. When you fall asleep, and again, the Hindu scriptures like the Question of Illumination by Shankara, or the Bhagavad Gita, or the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, they put a lot of emphasis on the state of deep sleep. They say in deep sleep, there's no difference between the beggar and the king, that they are all losing their ability to think and conceptualize the world, and they're entering this state of just being. And so in deep sleep, our brains slow down. We start to drift asleep. That's alpha. Our brains slow down. Then we drift down into theta, the theta band, and then finally into very deep sleep into delta. And we find that delta is the characteristic wave of most of our night's sleep, with occasional little flashes of theta when we're having vivid dreams. But basically, we're in theta and delta, those two slow brain waves, our whole time of sleeping. When we wake up, we move back into alpha, then finally into beta, and we're fully awake. And then if we have a moment of insight, like you solve a crossword puzzle, or you solve a major problem at work, you'll have a flash of insight, and then you'll have a flash of gamma, very fast gamma in your brain. What these mystics look like is totally different. They have a lot less beta, and then that makes room for a lot more alpha. They have an expansion of theta. Theta is the wave of healing. We find that people who are faith healers, people who are Qigong masters, people who are Kabbalistic healers, people who are energy medicine practitioners, they have a lot of theta. And theta is also the predominant wave of the Earth. The predominant wave of the planet is 7.5 times a second. That's how often it vibrates, the planet itself. So that's the same frequency we see in the brains of healers. And then finally, people who are highly psychic, highly attuned to their environment, they have a lot of delta as well. And then we see these monks and nuns, we see that they have enormous amounts of gamma. The average person has maybe a 3 to 5 second flash of gamma at best. These monks can sustain gamma for 15 minutes. And again, that's the brainwave of ecstasy, integration, compassion, and all of these insights and positive emotions. So we can literally hook someone up to an EEG, look at their brainwaves. We don't need to know how old they are, what gender they are. We need to know nothing about them. We can tell exactly what's going on with their brains based on the ratio of those brainwave frequencies. And these monks and nuns, their profiles are amazing. They are in the state of ananda, bliss. They have tons of gamma up the high end, lots of delta and theta at the low end, lots of alpha bridging conscious and subconscious mind. They're in remarkable both mystical states experientially and brain states in terms of their neurological wiring.
So quite interesting, because I'm a quantum healing hypnotist. And Dolores Cannon, and I don't know if you follow Dolores, but Dolores would call the state that we work in, that she taught us, the somnambulistic state, right there below theta, but very close. And I've had many clients, Dawson, when I move them from the theta, and I do clinical hypnosis in the theta brainwave state. Okay. And that's making suggestions and they're deeply relaxed. But when I'm in the somnambulistic state, when I'm doing a quantum healing hypnosis session, then the person, I can move them to different past lives and regress them different situations and try to find out, well, when did the trauma start? When did the beating start? When did the, whatever you're dealing with in this current lifetime, let's try to see if we can find this. But then Dolores had a twist. And when she moved you deeper into this somnambulistic state, we were actually able to have a conversation with the higher self, with the subconscious mind. And she's done, and she's passed away, and bless her heart, she's done thousands of regression therapy sessions and have written a number of books speaking directly to the person's higher self or the subconscious mind. Does that compute in some of your work, moving past the theta to this somnambulistic state?
Yeah, so a communion with your higher self is really the essence of what most of the paths teach. And the classic example is in Buddhism, where the goal is to become one with everything. And so there's a beautiful quote from Rumi. Rumi once said, our individual consciousness is not a drop in the ocean of consciousness. We are not a drop in the ocean. Our individual consciousness is the ocean in a drop. We are the whole ocean in a drop. And what you find happens is that you lose your sense of individuality. As I meditate, I'm not aware of this body. I'm not aware of this personality. That all just falls away. And I'm one with all there is. And the beauty of it is that this state is available to every human being. And all the traditions describe the ability to let go of the small, suffering, limited, time and space-bound ego and merge with the all that is. And the pleasure you experience there, the joy you experience there, is unimaginable to people who haven't been there. You're letting go of your struggles, your worries, you're letting go of, for example, past and future. It's very much a state in the present moment. You're experiencing it right here and right now in the eternal moment. You forget how old you are, what's coming next, all of your history. You're able to merge with the all that is. And all things become possible. There's also information out there. There are information fields, the fields of the cosmos are out there, and you're downloading them. In Mind to Matter, I look at the evidence for mind being generated by the brain. And this is the classical view of traditional neuroscience, is that as beings evolved and as we moved from being reptiles to mammals, finally to primates, then to Homo sapiens, we grew bigger and bigger brains. That gave rise to mind, this mysterious thing called mind with which we think. The amount of evidence, scientific evidence for that perspective is zero. The evidence is all predominantly that mind is a field. Mind is a field that we share, and that our sharing that field is something that we all participate in and we all connect with through our brains. Our brains are transceivers of information from universal information fields, and then they project that outward into what we call external reality. So if you have somebody who's all embedded in external reality, they look around you and say, oh, that's objectively true. There's that, and that. But what we find actually is that virtually all of it is a projection of what I've received and I'm transceiving through my brain. The brain is a huge transceiver. It's not the originator of consciousness. So when you let go of your individual suffering consciousness and merge with the all that is, you are then part of that, and you find love there. Like if
Mm.
you feel you don't have enough love in your life, just go meditate and tune into the infinite universe, and you'll find so much love. You don't know what to do with it all. There's joy there. There's laughter there. There's bliss there. There's gratitude in there. Like somebody asked me yesterday, Dawson, what are you most grateful for in your life? And they were thinking, well, grandchildren and living in a beautiful part of the country and taking a month-long meditation retreat, blah, blah, blah. I said, I'm so grateful for the breath I'm taking right now, and the next breath, and the next breath. That's all it takes to move you into absolutely hysterical bliss. So you want to be that happy every day. And you
Yeah.
have all these circuits in your brain that make it inevitable the moment you shut down caveman brain and enter that turn on that enlightenment network.
Well, a few things I want to mention before I ask you the next question. Transceiver, and it's a mystery, and I know it's not to you. While we have microscopic crystals in the brain, and we know that crystals hold frequency, so the term "the brain is a transceiver" is just absolutely falls into place. Um, um, we talked, and again, this I'm a transcendental meditator, and some of the things you were saying reminded me of Marishi, the founder of TM, and this moment when we reach transcendence, the level of peace that I am experiencing. I mean, just the fact that there's nothing but this quiet love feeling is absolutely amazing. And I meditate twice a day. But I want to mention that because some of the things that you were saying was just absolutely hitting home with me. But you are into healing traumatic memories. Can you discuss the groundbreaking research on memory reconsolidation and its potential to revolutionize the treatment of PTSD and traumatic stress?
Oh, that follows on very naturally from these states, because we used to think, like when I was in school in the 1970s and learning my first classes in neuroscience and psychology, we used to think that memory was static. Memory was of a event. So if I thought about my vacation 6 months ago, and I pictured the vacation in New Orleans, and I imagined walking down Bourbon Street, and then I forgot about it. And then a month later, I was talking to a friend. I talked about New Orleans, Bourbon Street again. We assumed that the memory I was retrieving the second time was the same as the memory I was retrieving the first time, which was the same as the event. What we've now discovered is that memory is not static like that. It's not like looking at an image on your phone from 6 months ago, then pulling up the same image again a year from now and pulling up the same image again, and the image is unchanged. What actually happens is that when we pull up a memory and retrieve it, we mix in elements of what's going on right now. And that's why EFT, tapping on these acupressure points, is so effective, because now I'm remembering the, say, terrible firefight in Iraq when I was in combat there. So I'm working with a warrior, and she's remembering a firefight in Iraq, and she's highly traumatized by the event, and she's bringing up that memory into consciousness now. Her heart's racing, her breathing becomes shallow, her face is flushed, she's highly triggered emotionally by the event. Then she taps, does the tapping, and what's going on now is that while she's remembering the horror of the firefight, dead civilians, the stench of decomposing corpses, children being killed, bombs falling, shells falling, all the danger she's in, people around her being killed, all of these memories are there, and they're triggering the stress response big time. So that's happening now. She's her adrenal cortex is getting that signal to turn on that gene CYP11B1. She's getting that signal to make less of cortisol. Now something else happens, and that something else is this. And now she's applying acupuncture stimulation to her body. She's using the pressure of her fingertips to stimulate those acupuncture points. That is a soothing signal. People just calm way, way, way down when you apply acupressure or acupuncture. So now her brain's getting a totally different signal. which says calm, everything's okay. If there was a firefight going on right now, you certainly would not be tapping on your kidney meridian. So the brain's getting these two conflicting signals, one saying go into stress, make cortisol, the other saying no, it's all calm, it's all in the past, just don't worry about it all, make DHEA. And it has to reconcile this mismatch between her physiological sensation of calmness coming from the tapping and the mental memory that she's having of the trauma. And what the body does is it prioritizes the physical signal of safety. When it knows it's safe, when you're tapping, when you're stimulating the antidote to stress, it gets that signal and then says, oh, okay, that firefight is not in the here and now. That was 15 years ago. That was then, now is now. So what it does to the memory is it removes the emotional tag of danger. And when it does that, it neutralizes the emotional content of the memory. The memory does not go away. She still remembers she was in a firefight 15 years ago. But the emotional content, the horror, the dread, and all the physiological triggering that's going by through her body and making cortisol and other neurochemicals, all of that goes away. Now she's calm after a while. And you'll hear, I mean, there's one woman who's now in her 30s, whose parents were killed in the Rwanda genocide in 1994, and she can tell you all about it, but she's just calm. She no longer has all that tagging after using EFT for many, many years, and now she's become a very successful entrepreneur in Rwanda. So it's able to, what we're doing is we now reconsolidate that memory minus the emotion. We have the memory and we don't have the emotion of emotional arousal attached to it. That's memory reconsolidation. We pulled the memory up. We've now plucked away the emotion. We put the memory back in our memory banks minus the emotion. I now tell you about losing my house during the financial crisis when my mortgage was underwater. I'll tell you about the terrible divorce. I'll tell you about the car crash. I'll tell you about getting cancer, all these things. And they no longer have the emotional impact. That's how we reconsolidate all of those old traumatic memories.
Absolutely amazing. And Dawson, is so interesting speaking with you because not only are you highly, highly educated at the PhD level and researched, for years and well written with 13 bestsellers, you also have a side of you that understands human consciousness and mindfulness and meditation and some of the modalities, which makes you a triple threat. You're mixing all these things that you've learned, but I want to pivot to an area that I've been working in a lot, and it's with athletes and mindfulness and having them understand through performance. And this is business owners and athletes and just regular everyday people, but enhancing their performance through mindfulness. How can athletes leverage the science and, so to speak, the flow and the mental training techniques to improve their performance significantly? And what does it say about the power of the mind, over our physical limits?
Yeah, so in World War II, there was a scientist working on the radar installations in Britain. He was an English scientist, and he worked on radar during World War II. His name was Maxwell Cade. And it was actually a German scientist German doctor who invented the EEG in the 1920s. And Maxwell Cade knew about this German research, then began to apply it after World War II and hook people up to simple EEGs back then. And he hooked up swamis and qigong masters and Native American shamans and indigenous healers and all these people. And he found that beautiful pattern we now know is the pattern of the awakened mind that is described in my books. So small beta, big alpha, lots of theta and delta, plenty of gamma. And so he found this, and he labeled that pattern, that brainwave pattern, the awakened mind pattern. When he was nearing the end of his life, he taught his methods to his protege, whose name was Anna Wise. And she then did similar work with a whole bunch more swamis and muftis and great spiritual leaders, found the same awakened mind pattern. It then occurred to her to hook up peak performers. So she would hook up a composer, she'd hook up an artist, she would hook up an athlete, she'd hook up a scientist, she'd hook up a business leader. And when that person was in this optimal state of flow that was then being written about and identified by Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi and other experts in the 1970s, they found that the brain waves of these people in flow states also were the awakened mind. And the huge insight that then began to dawn on us was that both flow and meditation are paths to the awakened mind, and they reinforce each other. If you are in the awakened mind state a lot during the day, the chances are you'll have a much calmer physiology. You'll enter meditation much more easily. If you're a meditator, the chances are you'll be in flow much of your day. So you'll get problems to solve, and you'll solve them easily. You have to perform athletically. Like the other day, I've been playing a lot of pickleball lately, and I play with my wife usually, or whatever friends are handy. And the other day, no one was around, so I just played at the practice wall. I meditated for an hour, and I played, and I remained in flow while I played pickleball with myself against the practice wall. It was a delightful experience just to feel that flow state. If I have a writing deadline, I first meditate, get into flow, then I write. Research shows that everything is easier when you're in a flow state. And I have a paper being published in a peer-reviewed journal soon looking at business productivity of meditators and people who are in touch with their higher self. And the assumption has always been that these monks, these mystics, these people, they had their head in the clouds, they didn't have their feet on the ground. They were no good at money, numbers, science, all of the practical stuff of life, relationships, child rearing. The opposite is true. We found that within a month, people's productivity at business and family stuff went up 20%. 20% increase in productivity in under a month when they were entering those states. So meditation, connecting with your higher self, translates directly into heightened productivity at work and at home.
Absolutely awesome. Let's talk about you now. Let's talk about all the amazing things that you have going on. Maybe courses or one-on-one coaching, or let's talk about the things that you have going on that the audience can benefit from.
Sure. I spent about 20 years researching PTSD because the people who suffer from PTSD suffer. I mean, these people are suffering. Talk to a Vietnam veteran who's had PTSD for 50 years, and you will find a depth of suffering there sometimes that is just life sapping. It just degrades their whole quality of life. Vietnam veterans have high levels of anxiety, depression, flashbacks, nightmares, intrusive thoughts, high rates of cancer, high rates of heart disease, high rates of diabetes, all kinds of medical problems, shortened lifespan. And I just had to work on this first. So I spent about 20 years researching that and setting up the Veteran Stress Solution to get it to people. And eventually we were approved by the VA, so it's now available in official settings as well. So that was one big initiative. But I then thought, okay, once you've solved that trauma problem, what do you do next? And the next thing is you move into higher states. And I began to explore some of these states that these monks, these nuns, these elevated masters are in. And again, I found myself becoming happier, Jason. I mean, I've always been a fairly happy person, but I released my own PTSD first, and then began to move into these elevated states and found myself getting to places in consciousness that I hardly imagined were possible. Just such pervasive happiness. And again, all it takes is breathing and walking and being to get that happy. You don't need to have a certain kind of car. I drive a pretty old car, actually, and live in a pretty modest house. And I just really don't aspire to a lot more, because all those things are fine for meeting my basic physical needs. And so you then want to move to higher consciousness. And what I wound up doing too recently is um, I used to travel a lot. I used to travel within the US and North America. I used to travel to Europe every year to teach for a month or two. And what I've been doing now that we have Zoom and online courses, I can do a lot of them on Zoom. But so I do teach courses. I teach a 4-day EFT intensive where I teach people how to use what's called clinical EFT, the research-based form of EFT. We have around 1,000 practitioners trained in clinical EFT who are superb and really expert at working with people with trauma. So I love doing the training. I love doing either in-person trainings at places like Omega and the California Institute for Integral Studies. I train in person, but I also do a lot of Zoom trainings. And I love doing those. But I actually quit traveling, and I no longer go to Europe every year. I rarely travel outside of my home base because what I found myself doing is exploring different states of samadhi. Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras talks about 9 distinct states of samadhi. And once you've traveled to, like, one of them is called Asmita Samadhi, one of them is called Ananda Samadhi, one of them is called Nirbija Samadhi. When you've traveled to these states of consciousness, your interest in picking up your physical body, putting it on a plane, and sticking it in a different country goes way down because you can travel so far. And this is the frontier that people can go to next, not moving their bodies around, but moving their minds, moving their consciousness around. And
Consciousness,
actually, the
yes.
Yoga Sutras shares with you how to actually project consciousness into distant locations. So that's what I'm doing now. And I've also built a series of courses. There's one called the 21-Day Walk with Your Higher Power. So you can take that. It's really inexpensive on our website. Most of our courses are free or just a very, very nominal amount. And then some of them are more expensive, like if you want to get certified in EFT or be mentored for a year on the Short Path to Oneness course. That's going to involve hiring a therapist and hiring a coach. But the bulk of my work now is available online, free or really inexpensively. So that's freed me up as well to just say, people, here's some amazing courses. Here's the science behind them. Do this stuff. You're going to shut down caveman brain, turn on the Enlightenment Network. You'll feel wonderful. And longevity is going to improve. Your health is going to improve. I just finished a clinical trial with cancer patients at Tel Aviv University in Israel, and we're finding that their levels of stress around cancer, around the recurrence of their cancer, drop dramatically after tapping. So I'm looking at applying it to addictions, to cancer, physical diseases, things like that. And what I've come to the conclusion is that we all have this enlightenment network in our heads. We all have the ability to make ourselves this happy, this healthy. We just need the tools to turn it on, to suppress that caveman brain, to express that enlightenment awareness that we all have the neurological hardware to do. Again, it translates that into gene expression, into increased physical well-being, into feeling great, and into greater longevity. Optimists live on average 10 years longer than pessimists. So all of these things are going to confer both better performance and a much longer, much healthier, and much happier life. So this is what excites me and is turning me on right now, is just entering these states of samadhi, playing around with which one I want to be in today, sharing them
Wow.
with people around me, and then putting them in online courses so everyone can do this too.
So, Dawson, can you share your website with the viewers, the audience out here?
Yeah, so go to one site, which is Dawson, my name, just DAWSON, gift, GIFT, dawsongift.com, and they will get the free EFT tapping mini manual. Download the manual, go to the last page. It has a summary on a single page. Just use that one page. Think of a bad thing that happened to you recently and tap and see what happens. Guarantee you're going to lose a lot of your stress. And the second thing that page has is a free meditation called Eco Meditation, ECO Meditation. You'll get a free Eco Meditation, free EFT mini manual at dawsongift.com. And from there, you'll see a menu bar that takes you to certified practitioners, online courses, live events, all these other features, but they're all accessible through that one portal of dawsongift.com.
When you mentioned moving consciousness, That sent chills down my spine. I'm a remote viewer. I'm also an associate remote viewer. And I've had out of body experiences. I've written about it in my book, Empowered by Consciousness. And when I'm remote viewing, I was taught by Tony Sivalele, scientific remote viewing. And I'm trying to locate an unknown object to me. I don't know what the object is, but the only thing I have are coordinates or numbers. And I have a pretty high success rate at picking out what the target is and giving the characteristics of it. In associate remote viewing, I'm able to predict future events, the stock market, win loss on NBA or NFL games, bad business deal, good business deal. And I have a 60+% win rate. And I was taught this, a win rate in sports betting. I was taught this by a gentleman who wrote a book called Picking Winners. He's the #1 psychic medium in Hawaii, David Wallace. And to hear you speak about moving your conscience at these deep states of flow, I've actually felt that, and I've actually done that, and it's an amazing feeling. It's a very amazing feeling.
Yeah, and again, these are techniques and ideas that are thousands of years old. I mean, the
Yes.
Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, they're grouped into 195 sutras in three groups, four groups, four chapters. Chapter 3 is all about this, and he's describing these states written down 2,000 years ago. The actual knowledge goes back thousands of years earlier, and so we have all this knowledge from ancient scriptures. We also now have the science to show what's really going on. So you're right, with percentages, we can test things like remote viewing, clairvoyance, clairaudience. And the research shows too that meditators have more of it. People who believe in it, people who practice meditation have many more what are called anomalous experiences than people who are skeptics. If you're skeptic, don't believe in it, it won't happen for you. So believe.
Dawson, I just want to thank you for coming on. We're about at that time where we have to wrap it up. I had a number of questions, but I was just sitting here just in awe of how articulate and how genius you are with the research you've done and the actual application of the work. And I'll just speak as long as you want. So and I'm angling to get you back at some point. So that's why, I have a number of questions that are left, but I really want to thank you for coming on and sharing with the audience. And just so beautiful and so informative. And I want to thank you.
Jason, what a joy. And I'm so glad you're into all of this stuff. And you're also bringing all these dimensions into your coaching. So it's not one-dimensional coaching, just focused on performance. You're bringing all of these spiritual, emotional, and metaphysical resources into coaching. And that's really what coaching needs. So I'm very grateful you're doing this work the way you are.
I bring it all in. I use everything that I've taught. And you mentioned earlier about realizing self and realizing the ego. I've done the experiments with psychedelics, and in particularly the albino mushroom, and I've had the out of body experience, and I've saw my ego just, and so I've tried to live this life, and I know why you want to be called. They just call me Dawson. I don't want to self-identify. And so reading Ron Doss's book, Be Here Now, teaches you that whole principle of just being, just being who you are within yourself. So I appreciate a lot of the things that you talked about today. They really resonated with me.
Oh, I'm so glad. And I know that as you keep on exploring that, you again will really serve other people in whole new set of dimensions and make a difference. So thank you so much again for your wonderful work, for sharing all this information with your community.
Oh, absolutely. I want you to hold on for a second. Don't go anywhere. Okay. I'm going to finish this out. I'm going to say some more beautiful things about you, but so just hold on. I'm going to move you off the screen for 1 second. Okay. Wow. Dr. Dawson Church. And I'm going to say doctor now because you need to know this. He's a very brilliant, but beautiful soul, beautiful spirit, most of all. In the book, you have to just go to Amazon and put his name in. You'll see the books that he's a bestseller on most of those titles. He's a science writer. In 3 of the books in particular that I'm going to go get, The Genie in Your Genes, Bro. Okay, I'm going to get that one. And I'm also going to go get Mind to Matter. All right. And make sure, and no, I'm sorry, in the Bliss Brain also. But make sure to go check out Dawson Church, Dr. Dawson Church. Absolutely wonderful. And understand what the peak states are and learn how to cultivate those. And he's given the website. So make sure to go and read about Dawson and understand what EFT tapping can do. And PTSD, that is something that every mental health coach, hypnotherapist, everybody in the world is trying to help people deal with this. And Dawson has a technique that he's perfected that's been around for centuries, but working with EFT and using it to combat post-traumatic stress disorder is absolutely wonderful work. But I want to thank you for being a part of expansion of consciousness. And I try to bring as many brilliant people, as many people who understand different levels of consciousness, coaches, healers, psychic mediums, because I want you to have information and to hear a number of people share their thoughts, share their work, and share themselves with you. And remember, trust, relax, and discover. Thank you very much. Good night.